Marvel vs. Capcom was at one point unstoppable, an epic series of crossover titles that provided the greatest tag team fighting games that were available on the market. Well, that was until a certain monkey came along anyway. Featuring in a high quality tag team fighting game of his own, this feature rich title would be so good that it would make Disney and Capcom's recent collaborative effort look embarrassing comparatively. You see, this fighting game contained everything that was so severely lacking in Capcom's latest crossover cash grab, and would thus aid it in becoming the tag team fighting game to play for a generation. So with all of this said, join me today as we revisit the fall of one of the greatest crossover concepts ever and celebrate the rise of the Super Saiyan's power and dominance. Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. This is how Dragon Ball Fighterz destroyed Marvel vs. Capcom. Yeah. Now I am desperate to talk about the excellence of Dragon Ball Fighterz, but before we can even get to covering its grand rise, we first have to talk about the series that, gameplay wise, appears to be its greatest influence, Marvel vs. Capcom. The Marvel vs. Capcom games were once epically amazing. Apart from allowing characters to appear side by side in circumstances we never thought possible, these titles innovated and astounded us in a number of other ways, most notably the 3-on-3 tag team combat, with much of the action that would take place occurring within aerial skirmishes in the skies above. Essentially, they delivered everything a player could have ever wanted from superhero fighting games. These were fun, chaotic, exciting titles that remained unmatched at what they brought to the table. But in 2017, all of this was about to change. This fateful year would see the release of the now infamous Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, a game that felt different to previous Marvel vs. Capcom offerings. Both then and now, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite is considered a somewhat controversial topic. While this fighting game is mechanically adequate in what it delivers, it simply lacked soul in comparison to its predecessors. Gone were the bright cartoon sprites and 3-on-3 chaotic tag team action, and in its place, bland, more realistic looking polygon character models and simpler 2-on-2 matches. The shift in gameplay style and art direction was for one key reason. Instead of putting out games designed to appeal to fans of these fighting games, Capcom and Disney were instead dead set on trying to put out a game that would appeal to the emerging audience who were into the MCU. This meant more simplified gameplay and a lot less endearing art style than seen previously, to make the whole thing look more like the Disney movies than the comic books that fans of the video games knew and loved. To add insult to injury, not only had the look of the game been changed, but some of the most beloved characters from these crossovers had gone missing. Most disgustingly, every single member of the X-Men, a decision that it is inferred was spitefully made by Disney as they were pretending the X-Men didn't exist at the time, as Fox's movie license had not expired with the characters yet, so they chose to temporarily scrub them from history, alienating long-term Marvel vs. Capcom players in the process. Instead, large chunks of the roster were not made up of the most popular Marvel characters, but rather the ones Disney intended to build brands around, such as Captain Marvel for example. But it wasn't just characters no one wanted to outrage the audience, but elements of the title's gem system, its inclusion of aggressive microtransactions, and its overall lack of polish were all very annoying too. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite failed to live up to the expectations set by previous entries in the series, ultimately leading to a negative reception from many fans and critics alike. Receiving poor sales and appealing to neither the established audience or the viewers of the MCU, few games felt like they didn't care about their fanbase as much as this one. While this was very much the case, thankfully though, not all was completely lost, as just 4 short months after the game's disappointing release, another tag team fighting game where you can take to the skies would rise up to steal its throne. Dragon Ball Fighterz arrived as a fighting game that hit all the right notes, delivering absolutely everything Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite had failed to deliver. Existing as one hell of a refined game, Dragon Ball Fighterz is simply brilliant. Born from a combination of Marvel vs. Capcom style action and everything that made the Dragon Ball series so loved and famous in the first place, the game is a visual tour de force of magnificence. But do you know what's even better? That I can get you an incredible 81% off the Ultimate Edition of this game, simply clicking my affiliate link. Honour Akira Toriyama's legacy now by grabbing this game by clicking the links in the pinned comments. But if nothing you have heard so far provides you with a strong enough reason to want to play it, perhaps the rest of this story celebrating this awesome title will be enough for you to change your mind. If we are going to talk Dragon Ball on this channel, which we never do enough of to be fair, we need to start our trip way back in 1984 with the legendary manga artist, writer and character designer Akira Toriyama. First finding mainstream recognition with his manga series Dr. Slump, he would soon solidify his legacy with, of course, Dragon Ball. Drawing inspiration for his tale from a 16th century Chinese novel Journey to the West, the Dragon Ball series follows the adventures of protagonist Goku from his childhood through adulthood as he trains in martial arts. From the story's humble beginnings to its more recent universe-threatening battles, all of this would result in Dragon Ball becoming one of the most successful mangas and anime franchises of all time, with the manga selling in over 40 countries and the anime broadcast in more than 80. With this huge success, it would of course also bring with it a huge amount of video games, and when I say huge, I mean huge. In fact, there are close to 100 different Dragon Ball games, and with there being so many releases over the years, if you were a newcomer, it would be difficult to know where to start. Since martial arts is at the heart of everything Dragon Ball, unsurprisingly a large chunk of these titles would be fighting games, but the magnum opus of Dragon Ball Fighterz would arrive with Dragon Ball Fighterz in 2018. Dragon Ball Fighterz was developed by Arc System Works, a company with a huge fighting game pedigree behind them, producing hit titles such as the Guilty Gear and BlazBlue series. This game, published by Bandai Namco Entertainment, stands as a pinnacle of 2.5D fighting games. Renowned for its breathtaking visuals, the game seamlessly blends 3D character models with a 2D plane, faithfully capturing the essence of the Dragon Ball universe. Dragon Ball Fighterz was initially released on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One and PC in January 2018, but due to popular demand has since been converted to run on other platforms. Like Marvel vs. Capcom at its very best, Dragon Ball Fighterz allows players to pick trios of 3 characters who can team up in tag-in, tag-out action to compete against trios of opponents. But to fully appreciate this title's goodness further, let's discuss the game's combat system and what makes it so appealing. The moment you start playing this game, you'll instantly garner a sense of familiarity. Familiarity beyond this title's great roster if you're a long-term fan of the franchise. What I'm talking about is the amount of positive inspiration that mechanically seems to have been taken from the Marvel vs. Capcom series, most notably the amazing Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Essentially, like in that all-time great, as noted already, 3 vs 3 action is back, and characters can be switched in and out at will, resulting in fast-paced, chaotic, high-quality fun. Pair this with the assist moves that allow for simultaneous attacks, involving your entire team of 3 characters. There is a lot to love here about this title's now classic style. Also matching Marvel vs. Capcom 2, this title has a 4-button control scheme. These represent light, medium, heavy, and a special attack button, typically mapped to a projectile. Each character has their own unique moveset with attacks that fall in line with what can be witnessed in the anime, along with several universal moves that are also available across the roster. Amongst characters' arsenals, building on the game's complexity, moves can also be performed known as vanish attacks. Vanish attacks allow players to teleport behind opponents so they can strike them from behind, but have other uses such as giving users the ability to avoid projectiles, extend combos, or simply move around the stage at a faster pace. In addition to this, we have a mechanic known as Dragon Rush moves. Dragon Rush moves are used for breaking the opponent's guards. Speaking of which, once an opponent's guard is down, it is then possible to launch them up into the air for an air combo, or even force them to tag out so you can take down a different character of their team. Essentially, if you're familiar with how to play Marvel vs. Capcom, you will notice mechanical similarities throughout. Further adding to the experience, we also have Super Dash Fly maneuvers. These allow players to pass through weaker projectiles to attack opponents, and players can perform a key charge that lets them manually increase their key gauge. If you are not already a huge Dragon Ball fan, the key gauge is the game's jargon for a super meter, which can be filled with energy that can be expended to perform certain moves. On top of these functions, the game also features a mechanic known as Come On Shenron, which includes fighters being able to gather Dragon Balls as fights progress to give them an extra advantage against opponents. In terms of actually obtaining these delightful magical orbs, Dragon Balls are gifted by the game for consistently performing specific combos throughout an encounter. If a player manages to assemble all 7, just like in the anime and manga, Shenron appears to grant a wish. With the opportunity to make a wish, the player will receive a choice of increasing their fighter's strength, reviving a fallen ally, recovering a fighter's health, or regenerating health for the rest of the match. Overall, this mechanic is a nice touch, especially considering it feeds back perfectly into the series' rich and celebrated lore. To add even more razzmatazz to the epic battles that can be experienced in this one, we would also get the inclusion of what are known as dramatic finishes. Dramatic finishes are special cutscenes that appear at the end of a fight, which feature depending on the characters involved in the finish and the stage related to the events from the Dragon Ball series. These can provide satisfying conclusions to encounters reminiscent of the fatality system found in Mortal Kombat, only much easier to execute this time around. The game was launched with an adequate base roster of 21 different characters, most of which originate from other Dragon Ball media, with a further 3 fighters being unlockable through achieving various in-game feats. If you like Dragon Ball, I am sure one of your favourites is likely featured in this lineup, but perhaps most intriguing of all, one fighter would be created specifically for this game. Android 21 is a character who has never appeared in the manga or anime, but for the sake of authenticity, her design was supervised by the iconic Akira Toriyama himself. But more on this awesome character very shortly. After the game was released, the roster of fighters to choose from grew and grew, and a further 8 fighters would become selectable for those who purchased the first Fight Pass DLC. The game would prove popular enough to receive multiple waves of DLC, meaning that the ultimate version of this game now has a massive roster of 44 characters covering many different eras of Dragon Ball's insane history. Speaking of these colourful eras, what would Dragon Ball be without its story? Dragon Ball Fighterz fortunately includes a story that shines throughout, with the narrative elements of the game being built around newcomer Android 21. I will not give any spoilers with regards to this game's ending, but to give you an outline of how events begin to unfold, new antagonist Android 21 repairs the long-gone Android 16 and uses the Dragon Balls to resurrect Frieza, Cell, Nappa and the ridiculous Ginyu Force. After bringing back these beloved baddies, she goes one step further and seals away the powers and souls of all of Earth's strongest warriors. Through the use of a linking system originally created by Dr. Gero, players can possess these warriors and provide them with strength, thus meaning that the players themselves play a role in this game's story. Making this all the more intriguing, we get to learn more about Android 21's intentions, gradually as we play through the story mode. The story consists of 3 separate arcs we need to experience, controlling different characters from the Dragon Ball universe. The first of these, known as the Super Warrior arc, lets us play as the heroes. In the second, we play as the villains, and the third time around, our questions are fully answered when we play as the game possessing Android 21. Speaking of Android 21, this is a baddie who is easy to get behind and can provide a lot of amusement at points. Sharing a lot of similarities with Majin Buu, she can transform her opponents into sugary snacks and eat them. This results in what looks like a lot of sexually charged moments, where she is often telling the other characters in the game how delicious they look, and how she wants to snack on them, often threatening to gobble them up. Whoever did the actual writing for this character must have been really into vor, but to be honest, nothing surprises me with Japan anymore. By completing the arcs, we can unlock things and level up our fighters, providing us with an extra sense of progression. When leveling up, new skills can be learned, allowing our fighters to benefit from extra health, defense or stronger special attacks, all in all providing an extra layer to this mode. If Dragon Ball is not something you're into, but you just love fighting games in general, then the game's arcade mode has you covered. Not only does this let players test their skills in 3 vs 3 combat, but the game adds extra appeal by grading players' performances after each fight. How well you do previously determines the difficulty of your next round of opponents, so some nice difficulty balancing is at play. Building on the features side of things, rather than including a simple in-game menu, Dragon Ball Fighterz opted to include a lobby-like overworld instead, which can be navigated by moving around your chibi avatar. Within this lobby, players can also communicate with others online through emotes and stickers that use screen grabs from the show. Additional unlockables can be purchased in this lobby through in-game currency, which can be procured through the completion of runs of the game's story arcs and arcade mode. The lobby also presents players with the ability to fight other players online, the key way many want to play fighting games these days. The game would be both a critical and commercial success for Arc System Works, thus far astonishingly selling over 10 million copies. To put that further into perspective, Tekken 8 has thus far seen 2 million registered sales, and Street Fighter 6 has seen 3 million. Never underestimate how huge Dragon Ball is. Speaking of a huge audience, back in 2018 it set the Steam record for the highest number of concurrent users for a fighting game ever. This game achieved everything that Marvel vs. Capcom wished it did. As expected, all the big news sites would cover this game's release, with IGN for example commenting that between the accessible auto combos, homing attacks and simplified command inputs, Dragon Ball Fighterz is an inviting gateway into the world of fighting games for newcomers, whether you are a Dragon Ball fan or not. Dragon Ball Fighterz has enough depth and complexity to glow as brilliantly as a Super Saiyan. GameSpot would praise this title too, agreeing that Fighterz is complex and distinct enough to be enjoyed by fighting game competitors, but there is no question that it's been designed to tap into the hearts of Dragon Ball's most dedicated fans. And no doubt those same qualities will win people over who've never given the series a chance. Where past games attempted to get there through huge character rosters and deliberately predictable trips down memory lane, Fighterz has bottled the essence of what makes the series' characters, animations and sense of humour so beloved and reconfigured it into something new. A Dragon Ball fighting game that can go toe to toe with the best of the genre. Across the board, players and journalists alike love this game, with many people now starting to believe that this is not just the greatest Dragon Ball game ever made, but the very best fighting game of a generation. The game delivers on every level. While it is certainly a sad state of affairs with regards to how low the Marvel vs. Capcom brand has fallen, and what a disappointment Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was, at least we have had a new high quality superhero style tag team fighting game rise up and take its place. Dragon Ball Fighterz is the crazy cartoonish 3-on-3 chaotic fighting game that gamers deserved. In terms of quality, this game destroyed its competition, and what may amaze you further is that the game has currently sold over 10 times as many copies as Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. A game that, despite being disappointing, is full of well-known characters owned by both Capcom and Disney. This speaks volumes not only about this title's high quality, but the enduring appeal of Akira Toriyama's work. Goku really is the sort of guy who can beat anyone, including the apparent combined forces of fighting game giants Capcom and the dastardly House of Mouse. What's really poetic about this though, and true to Goku's character, is that he didn't destroy his competition personally, and instead gave them a chance to make the right choices. Instead, Marvel vs. Capcom's own actions would lead to its embarrassing downfall. So remember, Dragon Ball Fighterz did not screw Marvel vs. Capcom, Marvel vs. Capcom screwed Marvel vs. Capcom. Hence why Dragon Ball destroyed the game in regards to both sales and critical acclaim. Do not forget that if you want to experience this all-time great fighting game featuring Akira Toriyama's greatest characters, you can use my link down below to get 81% off the Ultimate Edition of the title now. Or if you want to instead support the production of these videos directly, or want to communicate with me more on a personal level, consider backing the show over on Patreon. Cheerio!